More than 300 Sewage and Water Board employees were at their posts when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans on August 29, 2005. And they stayed through the catastrophic flooding that engulfed 80% of New Orleans after the levees broke. These dedicated and heroic employees were first responders providing critical emergency sewerage and water board system restorations, while in many instances fighting for their own survival and the survival of others. Their valiant efforts must not be forgotten but preserved for austerity as a testament to the courage, tenacity, and dedication of these employees in the face of overwhelming odds. Wow, man. So how have things evolved for you after Hurricane Katrina?
Prior to the hurricane, emergency management was a subgroup of the mechanical engineering department, where I worked both in the mechanical engineering and in emergency management. It was a full-time position there as well, but I had other roles that I had to do. Worked many other disasters, but Katrina was the biggest. And after Hurricane Katrina happened, I had to start to look at ways of building the department to one, from lessons learned, for two, from the magnitude of the damages, because my department was responsible for the FEMA claims. So I knew that this was going to be something really, really, really big.
So what were the lessons you learned as it relates to building things and also learning to integrate your department with other agencies?
Well, one of the lessons I learned was that we needed inside of the Sewage and Water Board, we needed an emergency operations center where we're all in one area. Prior to Katrina, we operated whereas though we had liaisons at the city's EOC, and then there was sub-command centers here at the board. And we were integrated well within those systems, but we needed that back office support. We needed the accountants, we needed the lawyers, we needed the bookkeepers, the logistics, the purchasing agent. So the city had that. But we needed it as well, because during a disaster, you need to buy things. Our plan was that we had access to the staff outside of the area so that they could get the information they needed in order for us. But as communications fell, we found that it was very difficult getting in touch with those employees. So we made the decision to build a command center here at the Carrollton Water Plant, so that all of the sections, operations, planning, logistics, and finance, and command is working in one area.
So you are a self-contained department now?
We are a self-contained department, yes. We utilize other sections of the board for those different command sections, because who better to do logistics than our current purchasing agents and department? Who better to manage the finances of the disaster than the accounting department that does it on a day-to-day? So we train every year on both the tabletop and functional exercise to get integrated with the new FEMA policies, as well as throwing different scenarios at them to have them fresh in their mind. We actually did it 2 weeks ago. I like to do it right before the heart of hurricane season, so it's in the back of their minds.
So would this be a prototype or a model for other agencies?
Yes. In fact, through the International Association of Emergency Management, there's a water utility section. And they're looking at the model that, I presented the model that how I formed this department and how this water utility is gearing up to become, the model for NIMS compliant. So they are looking at it, and a lot of other water utilities are going that way. And in California, the drought that they're experiencing is really taking its toll on the water utility. So they're constantly in a command state.
Now, how did your position change?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Well, one thing, I got rid of the engineering headaches that I had, and I inherited the FEMA headaches. And that's been really big. I manage $688 million worth of federal grants, as well as $220 million worth of HMGP grants. So as you can see, it's a lot of dollar amounts that I'm in charge of, both negotiating with FEMA, changes in scope, working with our engineering teams on those changes of scope, then working with the state to ensure we can get paid back, and their rigorous documentation process.
So it was almost like a reinvention process for you. You reinvented the position.
Yeah, Norman, it wasn't here. The board did not have an emergency management department or a FEMA claims department per se to to be able to handle the disaster of this magnitude. Under the direction of Mrs. Sam Martin, she felt as though that this was going to be such a multi-million-dollar funds pouring into us as a result of the damages that she wanted to keep it in-house. She wanted to have a staff member accountable that was part of the Sewage and Water Board as the pinpoint to negotiate these $1 million worth of grants. And
so where were you on August 29th?
I was on the 9th floor of City Hall, bunkered down.
What was that like?
It was scary. Both the building itself, as the hurricane moved in, you could hear things flying off the roof. The building shook. The hardest part for me was hearing the cries from the pumping station operators as the water started to come in on Station 5, and trying to know that they're going through this and staying with them through the night, trying to get them help. And then when communications fail, communicating with them, the board's communication stayed up, but the fire department, their trunking system went down. So we had to rely on our operators to tell us if they were going to be rescued or not, because the fire department had no communications. Then when the Army came in, there was confusion. There was a lot of confusion on what the mission was.
Really?
Yes.
So you were watching this confusion.
I was watching this confusion.
What was your reaction?
We had to do something. We had to get a helicopter for our people. We had to get equipment delivered. So we started to think outside the box. Here we have the military, which the mission was rescue, very important. But to deviate from that mission of rescue was they looked at moving equipment as a response. They hadn't yet moved into the response. So
they didn't understand the function of the Sewage and Water Board. They didn't understand how important you were.
No, they did not.
So how did you convey that critical necessity to them?
Well, figuring the person that was at the EOC wasn't listening, my assistant and I, Tom Deal, we decided to walk in the water over to the Superdome and talk to the person dispatching the helicopters. There, when we got there, we were able to convey to them how important it was that we walked to get a helicopter, what we needed. And that person in charge of the helicopters decided if it was important enough for you to walk over here, and we were able to explain to him, this is going to help out your mission of rescue, because we can drain New Orleans East if we get these transformers there. And that's what we did. And they landed here at the plant, got the transformers, but we knew, both Tom and I knew, that this would be a short-lived
victory
situation. Yeah, we had to do something to sustain a helicopter. So we got in touch with some private helicopters companies, well, let's just say had a vested interest in the Sewage and Water Board draining certain sections, and they provided us a helicopter for use free of charge, and the company's name was Air Products. They're located out there by NASA. They wanted to secure
How did you
NASA
get in
area.
touch with them?
Through the phone book.
Ah,
Through the phone book.
little individual
Yes.
ingenuity.
Exactly. Our phones were still working at the EOC. Surprisingly, it had a backup trunking system. So we were able to make contacts with these people and say, hey, look, we need your help. And they came to our aid.
But you had a sense that if you didn't make it happen, it wouldn't happen.
Exactly. And that's the emergency management training. Emergency management training tells us that, it starts with you first. You can't rely on someone to pull you out of the ditch. If you can climb out of the ditch, get out of the ditch. So, you have to obtain your resources first. Then when all means are exhausted, then you start looking elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Well, we look elsewhere and try to get our stuff too, so whatever comes first, and that's what we did. Mm-hmm. And that was helpful to get the products and rescue our people. And in fact, I got in a boat to go rescue the folks from Station A. What
was your reaction when you saw them?
Oh my goodness, Norman. When I got in the boat and we went down Claiborne Avenue towards Orleans Avenue to go by the Municipal Auditorium to rescue our people at Station A, I saw the just bodies, and it takes its toll on you when you're looking and you see these people that are just floating dead. And it wasn't a lot, but it was enough where one was too many. And then that to me, that still sits in the back of my mind, watching that. I don't know who the person was, and knowing that we can't rescue them and they're beyond rescue. This is what the story that person has to say. And that was hard. the unlawfulness that happened. People want to push that aside and say it did not. It happened. I was there in the EOC with Chief Compass, and you know, you could hear them talking. You could hear the panic in their voices.
It was
about
chaos.
Chaos, and you know, at nighttime you could hear the gunshots. You know, from the EOC, from just being on the top of City Hall.
To what degree did that cause you even more anxiety about the safety of your people?
Well, Mrs. Sanborn, it wasn't until Mrs. Sanborn called me one night and says, "Look, I need the police over here at the Algiers water plant. We're being attacked. They're shooting at us." What had happened was, and that concerned me. You know, how do you secure your people? Our guards had left all of our sites, which applied for National Guards. And I understood the National Guard had the responsibility of rescuing. Security wasn't a mission yet. But we had to do something for these treatment plants. So we began to be able to secure ourselves. Let me just leave it at like that, okay? You know, we're going to take care of all for it. And our people secured but the police came and helped Mrs. Sanborn at the Algiers plant. What had happened was a FEMA truck had delivered food and water. And it said FEMA Emergency Disaster Relief Supplies. And the residents, they were hungry and they needed water. Mm-hmm. But the communication gap wasn't, you know, they weren't going about it the right way. So we decided that to let the truck out and let them have what they wanted to have, and we'll get something else in here at this time, maybe a different type of truck coming in with nothing. The wording would probably be wise. But it wasn't until then that I realized it hit home. It hit home when one of our plants was under attack. You know, you hear the rumors, you hear the gunshots out there, but it's not personal until someone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, "I need help."
So were you able to eventually get to your people at Station A in the boat?
Yes. I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump around, yes.
That's quite all right. We're just having a discussion. So what was that like?
Well, I don't want to mention his name, but the operator did not want to leave the station. His wife knew to find him there.
He was so dedicated to...
He was so dedicated to staying at the station, and the station could no longer function. It was totally underwater. So at this point, there was nothing for him to do there. But he told his wife, who lived on Broad Street, that, "Look, I'm not going to leave here. Don't go anywhere else to be rescued. Come to the Station A." And he wasn't going to leave. And we had to talk him out that, you know, we're not going to be able to get you food, all these things. And, you know, he left. And later I found out that when he returned home, his wife had passed away.
Oh, no.
So it goes in the back of your mind. Had he stayed? Did she try to reach him? What happened? And that haunted his mind. And he had a severe nervous breakdown over the loss of his wife during that storm. But his dedication to, these are the type of people that work for the Sewage and Water Board. His dedication to the job was that he was going to stay at that station and make sure that the city could be drained and sewer could be drained as sewer system continue to operate.
Does it ever make you angry, knowing what you know about the dedication and the commitment of the Sewage and Water Board employees, to hear somebody disparage the Sewage and Water Board?
It does, because with any large utility or large government agency, there will be the bad apples. But I'm here to tell the citizens that this man at Station A, he reported to work. I'd be surprised if he made more than $13 an hour. He wasn't doing it for the money. He was doing it because he's dedicated to duty. Even when he knew that the city was totally destructed, devastated, his house may have been gone, all these things, he could have picked up and left. And a lot of employees vested to come back and restore the city. Having lost their homes, my wife was able to find a job in St. Louis, Missouri. I could have started a new life. Working in St. Louis, Missouri with the background I have in disaster management.
So that begs the question, why did you stay? Because
I'm dedicated to the city, into the Sewage and Water Board. That's straight up. I'm not just saying that because I'm being interviewed. I'm telling you, that's why. The men and women, Mrs. Sam Morton, she stayed. She was willing to bring us back, not sell us out to a private industry. Then they were coming knocking, we'll pull you out of here. You can turn the whole operations over to us. We'll bring our people in. We'll operate your plants. And Miss St. Martin said, no way. I remember that meeting. She said, absolutely not. These people have lost their homes, and many of their spouses have lost their jobs. The last thing I'm going to take away is something that I can hold on to. If they're willing to invest back in the Sewage and Water Board, then I'm willing to invest in them. And when I heard that, I said, you know, she's right. We're not leaving. This is something we're going to come back. And I lived on a boat for, I think maybe 3 or 4 months. My house uptown, and I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. Only the roof flew off. But I was able to, build that back and build the family back and come back. And many of the Sewage and Water Board employees, even when Hurricane Rita came, we had some of the pumping stations. Those same people that were in those pumping stations that flooded reported back to work again.
In the face of another hurricane.
In the face of another hurricane.
They still stayed.
And no, their station's not even at 30% back, 20% at best. They stayed. And that's dedication. And they knew, and I know, that if these folks that had this, being a 22-year veteran, and at that time around 10 years, while that institutional knowledge just walks out the door all at once, we're in trouble here. Because we need those folks to come back and help us build this back. They know the station. I need them for the FEMA claim. Who better to tell me about the station than the person that was working there? About the power plant. We need our engineers that were here before, and everyone came back. And it's the wow factor. We're a family here. We're a family, and with any family, you got that that person off to the side that causes problems, and we take the good with the bad.
What did you think when the levees broke?
Well, I found out about the levees by Station 6. They called over the radio to the EOC saying, you need to get in touch with the Corps to check something out here, because it's the only means of communications. Water's coming up through the discharge side over the wall, and that's not normal. And so I went over to the Corps of Engineers. I think we got a levee breach somewhere on the 17th Street Canal because too much water's pouring back from the discharge to the suction, and it's a lot of water coming from the Lakeview area side. And they immediately got in touch with the state. The state sent the helicopter, and that's when we found out we had a problem there. Then we found out about the London Avenue and all these other sections. And Mr. Sullivan says you could throw sandbags at that to here to the coming. Nothing's going to stop that water until the lake evens out with the city, because it's just too much force. And that's exactly what happened. We had to wait for the lake to even out with the city. When that happened, secure the breach and start the pumps and start pumping it out. And
so thank God for Mr. Sullivan.
Oh, thank God for Mr. Sullivan is right. The powerhouse, had not been for Mr. Sullivan. And Mr. Rudy St. Germain, Jack Herkamp, Todd Hathaway, Gabe Cinderella, and the machinists and welders, we would have, and electricians, we never started that powerhouse back. This institutional knowledge, the thing ran for 100 years nonstop. It's never been shut off. There wasn't a
100 years nonstop.
Nonstop. Not all the equipment, but it was producing power for 100 years since it's been built, as Mr. Sullivan put it. There's not a book that says this is how you restart a powerhouse from the ground up. And so with his institutional knowledge of being here with the engineers and through the time and his years here, he was able to figure out with the engineers, okay, how would we go about starting this? So one of the problems they had, there was no water for the boilers, no potable water. Mm-hmm. And having no potable water to get to the boilers, well, boilers need water to generate steam to get the turbines going. So how do you fix this problem?
How do you?
We got the fire department was here with their fire trucks. So we reverse pump operation. We pumped the water. Mr. Sullivan said, pump the water from the street to open it up the boilers and we'll fill her up. And that's what he did. We pumped out the basement, used the water we pumped out the basement to put into the boilers, and we fired them up, and that was untreated water off of the street, and those boilers were not designed. But at this point, we needed power back to our drainage station. So Mr. Sullivan says water is water. Well, it may not be good, for it, if we can get one started. And we started the system, and the turbine started, and Mr. Sullivan insisted, from what I understand from one of the engineers, he wouldn't let anyone light the boiler because of the gas. He wanted to light that boiler, but he wanted to do it himself. He wanted to talk, but we weren't going to. They had to talk him out of it because he didn't want to send an employee down there. He didn't know what would happen. But we got it started, and I was proud to announce to the to at that time Colonel Ebert, I'm like, she's up. How long, I don't know, but she's up, and we're going to start up the plant because there was fires going down Carrollton right across from the Archdiocese. The city was on fire. We had no potable water, to put out the fires, more or less just water pressure. So we were able to start the plant up, and that's when we started it up. We're working with FEMA. It's given us $36 million to build a water hammer. Lessons learned. When you start up the water plant from nothing, the water goes out like a tidal wave into the system.
Really?
And these pipes had been sitting there with all this water pressure on them, empty. No pressure at all. And when that pressure came, it's like the wrong plumber came to your house and opened up, they just busted an oasis. But there was no other way. Go install valves? The city's on fire, get it open. And FEMA recognized that was an emergency decision made, and it tore apart that system. But we were able to get some pressure. In fact, I remember Chief Parent going, "My God, when I said I needed water, I wasn't expecting it to come out the manholes all over the city."
He wasn't expecting a tsunami, right?
Yeah, so he said, "You got oasis coming out your manholes." I'm like, "Well, you said you wanted water." Well,
obviously, you were challenged.
Oh, we were.
Post-Katrina. What was the greatest challenge?
For me, the greatest challenge was the FEMA process. The FEMA folks
What was so challenging about that?
And there's no fault to them. I'm not pointing at them. They had to gear up like everyone else. So they were sending folks down here, hiring people left and right. They had no idea about the policies of FEMA were, and I did. And coming in here and trying to tell me that this is eligible and this is not eligible, with no basis other than their personal opinion. So I kept arguing like the water. I'm just going to take the water system. I explained it to them. We opened it up. They had damages, obviously, because of what, the storm caused the power plant to go down. Power plant caused us to open up Old Nelly and bust our pipes. Now, and I told them, we did not have a 100% system before the storm, but we had a system. We were pumping water to people. We sustained pressure. So it took years negotiating with FEMA to finally they came to understand a way and send some experts in here to work with our engineers to determine what was your loss of water prior to the storm compared to what was. That's what I was trying to give them. I said, look, I can give you what our loss of water was prior, so that sets that gap, right? That number, how many gallons, a million gallons a day you're losing before the storm compared to what you're losing now. Well, get me back to that number I was losing before the storm and say goodbye.
So given that, how instrumental would you say Sewage and Water Board employees were to the recovery of New Orleans?
Very instrumental, because when you can pull those same folks who were here before the storm to tell the story of what it was like before the storm, FEMA goes, well, okay, you can't argue with something like that. But if they had left, Rudy August, our chief of networks, would have left. What did you do before the storm? What was your work order process like? Because the records were lost. Where do you get that from? So under the direction of Cedric Grant, our new executive director, and what Ms. St. Morton started before she left was that each manager will have their manual for their department. So in the event something does happen, that manual is available for the next person to pick up and understand what the process was.
Last question. How would you describe the progress made post-Katrina in the rebuilding of the Sewage and Water Board system?
I would describe it to be, we took a old system, and the citizens are getting a state-of-the-art system. When that powerhouse is finished with the HMGP upgrades and the Katrina recovery, she will be a state-of-the-art, brand new powerhouse. The boilers, the turbines, the structure, she'll be ready. It's getting there. And I was asked from the guys from FEMA, how long do you think it will take you to get back to being able to be at least stable? I told them 10 years. And today we're stable. We're getting back to being stable here at the board. But we have a long way to go, full recovery. I would say that you're looking at the year 20, 21, 22, when we completely close the books and say we're finished the recovery of Katrina.
Why do you say it will take that
Because, well, we just settled, we're settling with FEMA for the water system. So now we have to go out and replace the water system, all the water pipes. Well, we have to coordinate with the city when they're ready to do the streets, other utilities. The design plans have to be built. We want to make sure that when we come in your neighborhood, we're going to come and we're going to change the water pipe, the sewer pipe, Cox Cable can do their things, Energy can do their things. So we're not bothering the citizens 2 weeks later. So that takes time to coordinate that. The powerhouse where we wish we could turn it off and rebuild everything at one time, we can't. It's a working, living, breathing mechanical machine. So we have to do it in stages to make sure we can continue to provide power.
So what is your legacy to the city of New Orleans? And this really is the last question.
Okay. My legacy was that I was given a task to restore the Sewage and Water Board, and I've done it. From the time that Katrina hit to hopefully the time I walk out here and retire, I want to say that I've closed the last project worksheet to the person coming behind me. I built an emergency management program, keep it going, keep it inside, and prepare for the next storm that will come one day.
The flooding of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina was the most devastating disaster to hit any U.S. city. When most of the city was evacuating, some 300 Sewage and Water Board employees stayed on the job, facing great personal peril to respond to this devastating crisis. We salute our Katrina heroes who met the greatest challenge of their lives and found a way to rise above the storm and overcome the impact of Hurricane Katrina. The board's forces dewatered the city in 11 days after the breaches were closed and began to restore quality of life, services of water, sewer, and drainage to the city. It was the restoration of these services that made it possible for citizens to return. It was the restoration of these services that made it possible for progress to begin, going from devastation to recovery, restoration, and today, rebuilding of the most complex infrastructure in the country. Today, confidence in the Sewage and Water Board's management and fiscal responsibility has resulted in the first water and sewer rate increases since the 1990s. These increases will be the building blocks for the development and the continuous rebuilding of the board's systems in the future.